The year was 1847, and the dusty streets of Willow Creek bore witness to humanity's darkest hour. In a town where gold fever had turned men into wolves, a desperate mother's tears fell like rain on barren ground. What happened next would shake the very foundations of what people believed about mercy, redemption, and the power of an unexpected heart. This is not just a story of survival, it is a testament to how love can bloom in the most unlikely soil, changing two broken souls forever. The autumn wind carried the scent of impending winter through the ramshackle buildings of Willow Creek, a mining town that had sprouted like a weed alongside the rushing waters of the Sierra Nevada. Evangeline Murphy clutched her infant son closer to her chest as she stood before the weathered saloon doors, her stomach hollow with hunger that had gnawed at her for 3 days straight. Her husband Patrick had been dead for 2 months now, claimed by a cave-in at the Goldstone mine, along with 7 other men whose families now shared her desperate circumstances. The mining company had offered nothing but hollow condolences and empty promises. The landlord had shown no mercy when the rent came due, and now Evangeline found herself with nothing left to sell but herself. The baby, little Thomas, stirred in her arms, his tiny fists searching for milk that she could no longer provide. Her body, weakened by malnutrition, had failed him in this most basic way. The sight of his pale, gaunt face had driven her to this moment of ultimate desperation. "Lord, forgive me," she whispered, her breath visible in the cold evening air. "But I cannot watch my child die." The Golden Nugget Saloon stood before her like a mouth of hell, its yellow lamplight spilling onto the muddy street. Through the grimy windows, she could see rough men in dusty clothes, their voices rising in drunken laughter. Painted women in tattered finery moved between the tables, their hollow eyes reflecting lives sold away piece by piece. Evangeline's hands trembled as she pushed through the heavy doors. The sound of a poorly tuned piano mixed with the clink of glasses and the shuffle of cards. The air hung thick with tobacco smoke and the sour smell of cheap whiskey. Conversations died as heads turned to stare at the young woman with the baby, her once beautiful dress now faded and patched. Behind the bar stood Big Martha, a woman whose face had been carved hard by years of witnessing human misery. Her shrewd eyes took in Evangeline's situation with a single glance. "We don't allow babies in here," Martha said, her voice gravelly from years of shouting over rowdy crowds. "Please," Evangeline stepped forward, her voice barely audible above the din. "I need work. Any kind of work." Martha's expression softened almost imperceptibly. She had seen this desperation before, too many times to count. Young wives left destitute by mining accidents, farm women driven from their land by drought or debt, immigrants with nowhere else to turn. "Child, you know what kind of work this is," Martha said quietly, leaning across the bar. "This ain't no place for a mother with a baby." "I have nothing left," Evangeline's voice cracked. "My husband is dead. I have no family, no money. My baby is starving and I cannot feed him." The piano player, an old man with missing fingers from a long-ago accident, had stopped playing to listen. Several of the men at nearby tables had grown quiet, their attention drawn to the unfolding drama. "There's got to be another way," Martha said, though they both knew the options in a town like Willow Creek were few and grim. Before Evangeline could respond, a voice spoke from the shadows near the back of the saloon. "How much?" The words cut through the smoky air like a blade. All eyes turned toward a figure sitting alone at a corner table, a man who had been watching the scene unfold with intense interest. Jeremiah Stone rose from his chair with the fluid grace of a man accustomed to command. Tall and broad-shouldered, he wore a black coat and vest that marked him as a man of means in this rough country. His dark hair was streaked with premature gray at the temples, and his green eyes held depths that spoke of experiences both terrible and profound. Unlike the other men in the saloon, Jeremiah was clean-shaven and well-groomed. His hands, Evangeline noticed, were not calloused from mining or ranch work, but they bore small scars that suggested a different kind of labor. Perhaps that of a surgeon or craftsman. "I asked how much," he repeated, his voice carrying the refined accent of an educated Eastern man, yet tempered by years in the frontier. Martha straightened, recognizing the tone of serious business. Mr. Stone, this woman just walked in here. She ain't one of my girls. Jeremiah's gaze never left Evangeline's face. I understand her situation. How much would you ask for one night? The words hit Evangeline like physical blows, yet she forced herself to remain standing. This was what she had come here for, wasn't it? She had crossed the threshold of respectability the moment she walked through those doors with the intention of selling herself. $50, Martha said after a moment's hesitation. Several men laughed at the astronomical sum. In 1847, $50 represented months of wages for most working men. Even successful miners rarely saw that much gold in their pouches at one time. Jeremiah reached into his coat and withdrew a leather pouch. Without counting, he poured gold coins onto the table, more money than most people in Willow Creek had ever seen in one place. The laughter died abruptly. Take what you need for the room, he said to Martha. The rest goes to her. Evangeline stared at the gleaming coins, her mind struggling to process what was happening. With that much money, she could buy food, rent, a room, perhaps even passage to San Francisco where opportunities might be better. There is one condition, Jeremiah continued, his voice carrying a strange gentleness. The baby comes with us. No, Evangeline stepped back instinctively, clutching Thomas tighter. I won't let you hurt him. I have no intention of hurting. Your child, Jeremiah said. But I will not see him left alone while his mother is otherwise occupied. Martha nodded approvingly. Room number 4 upstairs. Clean sheets, wash basin with fresh water. I'll have Dolores bring up some food and milk. For the baby. As Evangeline climbed the narrow wooden stairs, each step felt like a descent into a new kind of hell. The baby in her arms was her only pure thing left in the world, and now she was taking him into a situation that went against every maternal instinct she possessed. The room was small but clean, with a narrow bed covered by a patchwork quilt. A single window looked out onto the main street, where the last light of day was fading into purple twilight. Jeremiah entered behind her and closed the door softly. Sit, he said, gesturing to the single chair in the room. Evangeline remained standing, swaying slightly from exhaustion and hunger. Thomas had begun to cry, a weak, pitiful sound that tore at her heart. When did you last eat? Jeremiah asked. 3 days ago. Maybe 4. He shook his head grimly. And the child? He needs milk. My body cannot make enough anymore. A knock at the door interrupted them. Jeremiah opened it to admit Dolores, one of Martha's girls, carrying a tray with bread, cheese, and a small pitcher of warm milk. Martha thought the baby might need this, Dolores said, her painted face kind despite the hardness around her eyes. Thank you, Jeremiah said, pressing a coin into her hand. After Dolores left, Jeremiah set the tray on the small table near the window. Feed your child first. Evangeline looked at him suspiciously. You paid for my time. And I am telling you how I want to spend it. Feed your child. With trembling hands, she soaked a clean cloth in the warm milk and let Thomas suck on it. The baby latched onto it desperately, his cries quieting as drops of nourishment reached his tongue. Watching, her son finally able to eat, Evangeline felt tears streaming down her face. Now eat something yourself, Jeremiah said, tearing off a piece of bread and handing it to her. I don't understand, Evangeline said, though she took the bread gratefully. You paid for something else. Jeremiah sat on the edge of the bed, maintaining a respectful distance. What is your name? Evangeline Murphy. Your husband was one of the miners who died in the Goldstone collapse. It was not a question, and Evangeline realized he must have heard the story. The accident had been the talk of the town for weeks. Patrick Murphy, yes. He was a good man from what I heard. Worked hard, looked after his family. He was everything. To me, Evangeline whispered, cradling Thomas as he continued to nurse from the cloth. I don't know how to do this without him. Tell me about your life before, Jeremiah said. Before you came to California. As Thomas finally settled into peaceful sleep, Evangeline found herself talking. Perhaps it was the relief of having food in her stomach and seeing her baby fed, Or perhaps it was something in Jeremiah's manner that invited confidence, but the words came pouring out. She told him about growing up on a small farm in Ohio, the daughter of a preacher who had taught her to read and write. She spoke of meeting Patrick at a church social, their courtship conducted through carefully chaperoned walks and letters filled with dreams of the future. The decision to come west had been Patrick's, driven by stories of gold and the promise of a better life. "We were going to build a house," she said, her voice growing soft with memory. Patrick had it all planned out. 3 bedrooms, a real kitchen with a wood-burning stove, maybe even glass windows instead of oiled paper. "What will you do now?" The question brought her back to harsh reality. "I don't know. I thought if I could earn enough money tonight, maybe I could find work as a seamstress or a cook. But I don't know if anyone would hire a woman with a baby." Jeremiah was quiet for a long moment, studying her face in the lamplight. "You have options you haven't considered. Such as, you could work for me." Evangeline stiffened. "As what?" "I have a ranch about 10 miles outside of town. I need a housekeeper, someone to cook and maintain the house. The work is honest, and there's a small cabin on the property where you and your son could live." The offer seemed too good to be true, and Evangeline's hard-won wariness made her suspicious. "What would you expect in return? Good meals, a clean house, laundry done properly, nothing more." "I don't believe you," she said quietly. "Men don't spend $50 on a woman and then offer her honest work out of kindness." Jeremiah's expression grew distant, and for a moment, pain flickered across his features. "Perhaps you're right to be suspicious. Most men wouldn't." He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the darkened street below. "My name is Jeremiah Stone. I came to California 5 years ago, not for gold, but to escape something I'd done back east." "What did you do?" "I was a doctor in Boston. A good one, or so I thought. I had a wife, Elizabeth, and a daughter named Grace. She was about the age your son is now when she died." Evangeline felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. "What happened?" "Cholera swept through the city in the summer of '42. I worked day and night trying to save people, but the disease moved faster than my medicine. When it came to my own house, I was helpless to stop it." His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "They died within hours of each other. Elizabeth first, then Grace. I held them both as they slipped away, and all my medical knowledge, all my training, meant nothing." "I'm sorry," Evangeline said, understanding now the depth of pain she had glimpsed in his eyes. "I came west to forget, to lose myself in work and isolation. I built a ranch, raised cattle, tried to build a new life, from nothing. But tonight, when I saw you with your baby, desperate to save him," he turned back to face her, "I saw myself 5 years ago, powerless to protect what mattered most. So you want to help me?" "I want to help your son. I couldn't save my Grace, but perhaps I can keep another child from suffering." The honesty in his voice reached something deep inside Evangeline, a part of her that recognized genuine grief and the need for redemption that came with it. "If I came to work for you, it would be as your employee, nothing more. You have my word. And if I chose to leave, you would be free to go at any time." Evangeline looked down at Thomas, sleeping peacefully in her arms. The prospect of honest work, a safe place to raise her son, seemed like a miracle she dared not believe in. "Why should I trust you?" Jeremiah returned to his seat on the bed, his movements careful and respectful. "Because I understand what it means to lose everything. Because I know the desperation that drives a person to consider things they never thought possible. And because your son deserves better than what this town can offer him." Outside, the sounds of the saloon continued. Laughter, shouting, the occasional crash of breaking glass. It was a world Evangeline had never imagined becoming part of. Yet, here she was, negotiating the terms of a life she could barely comprehend. "What about the money you paid?" she asked. "Consider it an advance on your wages. That's far too much for housework. Then consider it payment for giving me the chance to do something good for once, instead of simply existing." The weight of decision pressed down on Evangeline like a physical force. Every instinct told her to be cautious, to expect the worst from men who made generous offers. Yet something in Jeremiah's manner, in the genuine pain she heard in his voice when he spoke of his lost family, made her want to believe in the possibility of kindness. "If I say yes," she said slowly. "When would we leave?" "First light tomorrow if you're willing. I have a wagon outside, supplies for the journey." "You were very confident I would accept." A ghost of a smile crossed Jeremiah's face. "I was hopeful." Thomas stirred in her arms, making the small sounds babies make in their sleep. Looking at his peaceful face, Evangeline made her decision. "All right," she said. "I'll come with you." The relief on Jeremiah's face was unmistakable. "You won't regret this choice." "I hope not." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the sounds of the night. Eventually, Jeremiah rose to leave. "Get some rest," he said. "Tomorrow will be a long day." "Mr. Stone," Evangeline called as he reached the door. "Thank you." He paused, his hand on the doorknob. "Thank you, Mrs. Murphy, for giving me the chance to remember what it feels like to hope." After he left, Evangeline lay on the narrow bed with Thomas beside her, staring at the ceiling and wondering if she had just made the best or worst decision of her life. Outside, Willow Creek settled into its nightly rhythm of vice and desperation. But for the first time in months, Evangeline fell asleep without fear. The morning sun painted the eastern mountains gold when Jeremiah's wagon arrived outside the Golden Nugget. Evangeline emerged from the saloon carrying her few possessions in a worn carpet bag, Thomas bundled against the morning chill. The wagon was well built and sturdy, pulled by two strong horses that spoke of careful breeding rather than the rough stock common to mining country. Jeremiah had loaded it with supplies, food, blankets, and what appeared to be several pieces of furniture covered by canvas. "Good morning," he said, helping her climb onto the wagon seat. "Did you sleep well?" "Better than I have in weeks," she admitted. As they rolled out of Willow Creek, Evangeline looked back at the ramshackle town that had nearly claimed her soul. The morning light made it seem less threatening somehow, just another collection of desperate people trying to carve out existence from an unforgiving land. "Tell me about your ranch," she said, as they settled into the rhythm of travel. "It's called Stone Creek Ranch," Jeremiah said, guiding the horses along a trail that wound up into the foothills. "I built it in a valley about 3 miles from the nearest water source. Good grazing land, protection from the worst weather." "How many cattle do you run?" "About 200 head at last count. I sell beef to the mining camps and occasionally drive a herd down to Sacramento." As they climbed higher into the mountains, the air grew cleaner and cooler. Pine trees replaced the scrub oak of the lower elevations, and the sound of rushing water could be heard in the distance. "It's beautiful," Evangeline said, and meant it. After months in the dusty ugliness of Willow Creek, the natural beauty of the mountains felt like a blessing. "Elizabeth would have loved it here," Jeremiah said quietly. "She always preferred the country to the city." "Tell me about her." For the next hour, as the wagon wound through increasingly spectacular scenery, Jeremiah shared memories of his lost wife. Elizabeth had been the daughter of a minister, much like Evangeline herself. She had been interested in his medical work, often helping him prepare medicines and tend to patients who couldn't afford to pay. She wanted to be a doctor herself, he said. Of course, that was impossible for a woman in Boston society. But she was brilliant, far more intuitive about healing than I ever was. "She sounds wonderful." She was, and Grace was just like her, curious about everything, always asking questions. She would have been walking by now, probably getting into everything. The pain in his voice was still fresh, and Evangeline found herself wanting to comfort him. It seemed strange that she, who had her own grief to bear, should feel sympathy for this man who had rescued her from desperation. Yet shared sorrow created its own kind of bond. By midday, they reached a ridge that looked down into a broad valley. Evangeline caught her breath at the sight that met her eyes. A substantial log house sat nestled among cottonwood trees near a creek that sparkled in the sunlight. Corrals and outbuildings were arranged with careful precision, and cattle dotted the grassland that stretched for miles in every direction. "It's magnificent," she breathed. "It's home," Jeremiah said simply. They descended into the valley. Evangeline noticed the attention to detail that marked everything about the ranch. The fences were straight and well-maintained, the buildings showed signs of careful craftsmanship, and even the approach to the main house had been planned with an eye for both function and beauty. The house itself was larger than she had expected, built of massive logs with a wide porch that wrapped around 3 sides. Smoke rose from the chimney, indicating that someone was maintaining the fire in their absence. "Miguel Santos looks after things when I'm away," Jeremiah explained, seeing her questioning look. "He and his wife Rosa have worked for me since the beginning. You'll like them." As if summoned by his words, a man emerged from the house. Miguel Santos was a compact, weathered man in his 50s, with the dignified bearing of someone accustomed to responsibility. Behind him came a woman of similar age, her graying hair pinned back neatly and her dress practical but well cared for. "Señor Jeremiah," Miguel called, approaching the wagon. "Welcome home. Miguel Rosa, I'd like you to meet Mrs. Evangeline Murphy and her son Thomas. They'll be staying with us." Rosa's eyes took in Evangeline's situation with the quick assessment of a woman who had raised children of her own. "The little one, he is hungry, yes? I fed him this morning, but—" "Come," Rosa interrupted gently. "We will see to his needs first, then talk of other things." As the women disappeared into the house, Miguel helped Jeremiah unload the wagon. "She is the woman from the town?" he asked in Spanish. "She is a widow with a child who needed help," Jeremiah replied in the same language. "Nothing more." Miguel nodded, but his expression suggested he understood more than was being said. Inside the house, Evangeline found herself in a main room that was both spacious and comfortable. A large stone fireplace dominated one wall, with comfortable chairs arranged to take advantage of its warmth. Bookshelves lined another wall, filled with volumes that spoke of Jeremiah's education and interests. "Your room is this way," Rosa said, leading her down a hallway to a bedroom that was larger and better furnished than any place Evangeline had lived since leaving Ohio. A substantial bed covered with quilts that showed the work of skilled hands dominated the room. A wardrobe stood against one wall, and a rocking chair sat near the window that looked out over the valley. "This is too fine," Evangeline protested. "I'm here to work as a housekeeper." "You are here as our guest," Rosa said firmly. "Señor Jeremiah, he explained that you will help with the house, but first you must rest and grow strong again." That evening, they gathered around the large table in the kitchen for a meal that seemed impossibly luxurious after months of privation. Rosa had prepared beef stew with vegetables from her garden, fresh bread, and milk still warm from the cow. Thomas, fed and content, slept in a wooden cradle that Miguel had brought down from the attic. "My children used this cradle," Rosa explained. "Now they are grown with children of their own in San Antonio, but the cradle waited for another baby to bless this house." "You have children?" Evangeline asked. "3 sons and 2 daughters," Rosa replied with obvious pride. "All married now, giving us grandchildren to spoil when we visit. Why do you stay here instead of being with them?" Rosa and Miguel exchanged a look. "Señor Jeremiah saved our lives once," Miguel said. "We will not abandon him now when he needs family most." "What happened?" "Bandits attacked our ranch in Texas," Rosa explained. "They killed our livestock, burned our home. We had nothing left and no place to go. Jeremiah found us on the road, brought us here, gave us work and purpose again." "He seems to make a habit of rescuing strays," Evangeline observed. "Perhaps," Rosa said, "or perhaps God puts people in his path who need each other." Over the following weeks, Evangeline settled into the rhythm of ranch life. Her duties were exactly as Jeremiah had promised: cooking, cleaning, laundry, and general housekeeping. Rosa taught her the routines of the ranch, showed her where supplies were kept, and helped her understand the preferences of the men. Thomas thrived in the mountain air and regular meals. He began to gain weight, his pale complexion taking on a healthy color, and his cries of hunger were replaced by the contented sounds of a well-fed baby. Jeremiah was a considerate employer, making sure she had everything she needed, but maintaining a respectful distance. He spent his days working with the cattle, mending fences, and managing the complex business of running a ranch. In the evenings, he often retreated to his study to read or work on correspondence. It was a peaceful existence, far removed from the chaos and desperation of Willow Creek. Yet Evangeline found herself studying Jeremiah when she thought he wasn't looking, trying to understand the man who had rescued her from degradation and asked for nothing in return. She noticed that he often stood on the porch in the evenings, looking toward the east with an expression of profound sadness. Sometimes she heard him pacing in his room late at night, as if sleep would not come. Despite the comfortable life he had built, there was a loneliness about him that spoke of wounds that had not healed. One evening in November, as the first snow began to dust the mountain peaks, Evangeline found him sitting by the fire reading a letter. His expression was troubled, and she noticed that his hands shook slightly as he folded the paper. "Bad news?" she asked, setting down the mending she had been working on. "News from Boston," he said. "My former colleagues want me to return. There's a position available at Massachusetts General Hospital." "That's wonderful," Evangeline said, though something in his manner suggested he didn't view it as good news. "Is it? I've been gone 5 years. The man who left Boston is not the same man who sits here tonight. Perhaps that's not entirely a bad thing." He looked at her with surprise. "What do you mean?" Evangeline chose her words carefully. "The man who left Boston was running from grief. The man I see here has found a way to build something meaningful from loss. You think I should stay?" "I think you should do whatever brings you peace." Jeremiah set the letter aside and studied her face in the firelight. "What would bring you peace, Evangeline?" The question caught her off guard. I don't know. I haven't thought that far ahead. I've been focused on survival for so long, I'd forgotten what it meant to think about happiness. But you're safe now. You and Thomas have a home here for as long as you wanted. What do you dream about now?" It was a conversation that felt dangerously intimate, crossing boundaries that had been carefully maintained between employer and employee. Yet Evangeline found herself answering honestly. "I dream about Thomas growing up strong and healthy. I dream about him having opportunities I never imagined possible. I dream about—" She paused, unsure if she should continue. "About what?" "About finding love again someday. Not the desperate need for survival, but the kind of love Patrick and I had. Partnership, respect, shared dreams for the future." "You're still young," Jeremiah said quietly. "There's no reason you shouldn't have all of those things." "And you? What do you dream about?" The question seemed to surprise him. "I used to dream about forgetting. Now I'm not sure." Thomas chose that moment to wake with the cranky cry of a baby who needed attention. As Evangeline rose to tend to him, Jeremiah caught her hand. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For reminding me that it's possible to dream about something other than the past." As winter settled over the valley, the rhythm of ranch life changed. The cattle were moved to lower pastures where they could find grass beneath the snow. Much of the work shifted to maintaining equipment, planning for spring, and simply enduring the cold months. The isolation that came with winter weather brought the household closer together. Evenings were spent around the fire, with Rosa mending clothes, Miguel carving small toys for Thomas, and Jeremiah reading aloud from his extensive library. Evangeline discovered that Jeremiah was not only well-educated, but possessed a voice perfectly suited for storytelling. He read from Dickens and Scott, from books of poetry and adventure stories, bringing the words to life with a skill that spoke of natural talent. "You should have been a teacher," she told him one evening after he had finished a particularly engaging passage from The Last of the Mohicans. "Elizabeth used to say the same thing," he replied. "She thought I wasted my talent for explanation on medical students who were more interested in the social aspects of their education than learning." "Why did you choose medicine?" "My father was a doctor, as was his father before him. It seemed natural to follow the family profession." "But you enjoyed it?" Jeremiah considered the question. "I enjoyed helping people, solving the puzzle of illness, using knowledge to ease suffering. The rest, the politics of hospital life, the social obligations, the constant pressure to expand my practice, I could have done without." "You could still practice here," Evangeline suggested. There's certainly need for a good doctor in the mining camps. I've thought about it, but after what happened to Elizabeth and Grace, I'm not sure I trust myself with other people's lives. That's foolish, Evangeline said with uncharacteristic directness. You couldn't prevent a cholera epidemic any more than you could stop an earthquake or a flood. Some things are beyond human control. Easy words to say, harder to believe. I know something about blame, Evangeline said quietly. I spent weeks after Patrick's death wondering what I could have done differently. Should I have insisted we stay in Ohio? Should I have talked him out of working in the mines? Should I have seen signs that the mine wasn't safe? And what conclusion did you reach? That I was giving myself credit for power I never had. Patrick made his own choices based on his own dreams. The mine collapse was an accident that no one could have predicted or prevented. My guilt was just another form of pride. The belief that I could have controlled things that were never mine to control. Jeremiah absorbed her words in silence, staring into the fire. When did you become so wise? Desperation teaches hard lessons quickly. Christmas came quietly to the ranch. Rosa prepared a special meal, and Miguel cut a small pine tree that they decorated with paper ornaments and candles. It was Thomas's first Christmas, and watching him reach for the flickering lights with wonder-filled eyes brought both joy and sadness to the adults who remembered other Christmases with other children. On Christmas morning, Jeremiah presented Evangeline with a gift that took her breath away, a bolt of deep blue fabric fine enough for a Sunday dress, along with thread, buttons, and trim. I can't accept this, she protested. It's far too expensive. You've been wearing the same 2 dresses since you arrived, he said. A woman should have something beautiful to wear. I'm a housekeeper, not a guest. You're a woman who deserves better than she's had, he replied firmly. Please, accept it as a friend. The word, friend, hung in the air between them, marking a subtle shift in their relationship. They were no longer simply employer and employee, but something more complex and potentially dangerous. Evangeline's gift to Jeremiah was modest by comparison, a bookmark she had made from leather scraps, decorated with careful stitching. Yet his reaction suggested it meant more to him than its simple nature warranted. It's been years since anyone made something specifically for me, he said, examining the careful workmanship. Thank you. That evening, as they sat by the fire with Thomas playing on a blanket at their feet, Jeremiah broke the comfortable silence with an unexpected question. Evangeline, are you happy here? The question seemed simple, but the intensity of his gaze suggested deeper currents. Yes, she said honestly. Happier than I thought possible after Patrick died. Happy enough to stay permanently? What do you mean? Jeremiah set down his book and turned to face her fully. I mean that I've grown accustomed to having you here. You and Thomas have brought life back to this house in ways I didn't expect. We have a business arrangement, which could become something more, if you were willing. The words hung between them like a bridge that once crossed could never be uncrossed. Evangeline felt her heart begin to race as she understood what he was suggesting. Jeremiah, I'm not asking for an answer tonight, he said quickly. I'm simply telling you that my feelings toward you have changed. What began as sympathy and a desire to help has become something deeper. You barely know me. I know that. You're brave enough to do whatever necessary to protect your child. I know that you're intelligent, kind, and stronger than you realize. I know that Thomas lights up when he sees you, and that you've somehow made this house feel like a home again. Evangeline stood abruptly, pacing to the window where she could see snow falling gently in the moonlight. This is complicated. Life is complicated. The question is whether we face those complications alone or together. I was desperate when I met you. How can you be sure my feelings aren't just gratitude? How can anyone be sure of their feelings? All I know is that I wake up looking forward to seeing you each morning, and I go to sleep grateful that you're safe under my roof. Thomas chose that moment to demand attention, fussing in the way that indicated he needed feeding and changing. As Evangeline tended to him, Jeremiah watched with an expression she had never seen before, one of longing mixed with hope. Think about it, he said as she prepared to take Thomas to their room. That's all I ask. Over the following weeks, Evangeline found herself studying Jeremiah with new eyes. She noticed the way he was careful never to make her uncomfortable, how he always asked permission before picking up Thomas, how he went out of his way to make her life easier without making her feel indebted. She also noticed things about herself that surprised her. The way her pulse quickened when he entered a room. How she found herself taking extra care with her appearance in the mornings. The comfort she felt in his presence, as if some part of her that had been tense since Patrick's death was finally able to relax. Yet the memory of her desperation in Willow Creek haunted her. How could she trust her own feelings when they had developed under such unusual circumstances? Was what she felt for Jeremiah genuine affection, or simply the gratitude of a rescued woman for her rescuer? The answer came unexpectedly on a February morning when a stranger appeared at the ranch. Evangeline was in the kitchen preparing breakfast when she heard horses approaching. Through the window, she saw two men dismounting near the porch, rough-looking, characters whose presence immediately set her on edge. Jeremiah emerged from the barn, Miguel beside him. The conversation was too distant for Evangeline to hear words, but the body language spoke volumes. The strangers were agitated, gesturing toward the house, while Jeremiah maintained a calm but firm stance. "Rosa," Evangeline called softly. "Come, look at this." Rosa joined her at the window, and her face darkened as she recognized one of the men. "Trouble," she said simply. "That is Jake Morrison, a bad man from the camps. He brings nothing but problems." As if summoned by her words, the conversation outside grew heated. Voices carried on the cold air, and Evangeline caught fragments of angry words. "No, she's here," Morrison was saying. "Worth good money." Jeremiah's response was too quiet to hear, but his posture suggested he was not backing down. Miguel had moved to position himself between the strangers and the house, his hand resting on the handle of his knife. "Take Thomas to the back room," Rosa said urgently. "Lock the door and don't come out until I tell you." "What's happening?" "They've come for you," Rosa said grimly. "Someone in Willow Creek must have told them where you went." Fear coursed through Evangeline's veins as she gathered Thomas and hurried to the back bedroom. Through the thin walls she could hear the conversation growing more heated. "She owes a debt," Morrison was shouting now. "Money was paid, services not rendered. That makes her a thief." "The debt was paid in full," Jeremiah replied, his voice carrying clearly now. "I have witnesses. You paid for one night. She's been here months. That's theft of services, and we're here to collect. You're here to leave my property immediately, or face the consequences." Evangeline pressed her ear to the door. Thomas clutched tightly in her arms. The baby seemed to sense the tension, remaining unusually quiet. "Consequences?" Morrison laughed harshly. "You think you can threaten us? We know about your past, Dr. Stone. We know why you really left Boston." The silence that followed was ominous. When Jeremiah spoke again, his voice was deadly quiet. "I suggest you elaborate on that statement. Medical malpractice, wasn't it? Killed a patient through negligence, then ran west to avoid prosecution. The Massachusetts Medical Board has a warrant out for your arrest." Evangeline's blood ran cold. Was it possible that Jeremiah had been lying about his past? Had she trusted her safety and her son's future to a man who was hiding criminal behavior? "You're fishing," Jeremiah said, but there was something in his tone that suggested Morrison had hit close to home. "Am I? We've got friends in the territorial marshal's office. One telegram, and they'll be here with extradition papers. Unless, of course, we reach an accommodation." "What kind of accommodation?" "The woman comes with us, works off her debt properly. You get to keep your secrets, and we all walk away happy. Over my dead body." "That can be arranged too." The sound of guns being drawn was unmistakable. Evangeline's heart hammered as she realized how quickly the situation had escalated to violence. Through the window of the back room she could see Miguel moving toward the house, his own weapon drawn. "Rosa," she called softly. "What's happening?" "Stay quiet," Rosa hissed back. "Miguel and Jeremiah, they can handle this." But Evangeline knew that 2 against however many Morrison had brought was not good odds. More importantly, she realized that she couldn't bear the thought of Jeremiah being hurt, because of her. Whatever his past held, whatever mistakes he might have made, he had shown her nothing but kindness and respect. Making a decision that terrified her, Evangeline unlocked the door and stepped into the hallway. Rosa tried to stop her, but she pushed past, Thomas still in her arms. "I'm here," she called out, walking toward the front door. "Let's talk about this reasonably." The tableau that greeted her on the porch was tense beyond description. Jeremiah and Miguel stood side by side, guns drawn but not yet aimed. Morrison and his companion, a scarred man she didn't recognize, had their weapons out as well, creating a standoff that could turn deadly in an instant. "Evangeline, go back inside," Jeremiah said without taking his eyes off Morrison. "No," she replied, stepping onto the porch. "This is about me. I should be part of the discussion." Morrison's eyes lit up with greedy satisfaction. "There's the little dove, looking much better than when we last saw her." "You weren't at the saloon that night," Evangeline said, studying his face. "No, but I heard about it. $50 for a desperate widow, that's a transaction that gets talked about, especially when the woman disappears without fulfilling her end of the bargain." "The bargain was fulfilled," Jeremiah said coldly. "I have the receipt from Martha to prove it." "Receipt for what? One night? That's what you paid for. She's been here months, eating your food, sleeping in your bed. That's theft, plain and simple." "She's been working as my housekeeper," Jeremiah replied, "earning honest wages for honest work." Morrison laughed crudely. "Housekeeper? Is that what you call it? We all know what kind of housekeeping a woman like her provides." The insult hit Evangeline like a physical blow, but it was Jeremiah's reaction that surprised her. His face went white with rage, and for a moment, she thought he might shoot Morrison where he stood. "You will apologize for that remark," Jeremiah said, his voice shaking with fury. "Immediately. Or what? You'll kill me like you killed that patient in Boston?" "What patient?" Evangeline asked, unable to stop herself. Morrison's grin was ugly. "Didn't he tell you? Our good doctor here performed surgery while drunk. Patient died on the table. Rather than face the consequences, he ran west with his tail between his legs." Evangeline looked at Jeremiah, searching his face for denial. Instead, she saw confirmation, and shame so deep it seemed to consume him. "It's true," he said quietly. "Not the way he tells it, but the essential facts are accurate." The admission hit Evangeline harder than she expected, not because she condemned him for his past, but because she realized how much courage it must have taken to admit it in front of these men who would use it against him. "Tell me," she said, ignoring the guns and the danger to focus on Jeremiah's face. "I was called to perform emergency surgery on a young woman who had been trampled by a horse. I had been drinking at a colleague's retirement party, but I thought I was sober enough to operate. I was wrong." His voice was barely audible, but the words carried clearly in the cold air. "She died because of my arrogance, my belief that I could function normally when I was impaired. Her name was Margaret Collins. She was 19 years old, about to be married. And then you ran," Morrison said with satisfaction. "Then I ran," Jeremiah agreed. "I couldn't face her family, couldn't face the medical board, couldn't face the consequences of what I'd done. I was a coward." Evangeline felt tears stinging her eyes, but not for the reasons Morrison might have expected. She wept for the young woman who had died, for the families destroyed by tragedy, and for the man who had carried this burden for 5 years without forgiveness. "That doesn't change what's owed," Morrison said, clearly enjoying Jeremiah's confession. "The woman comes with us, or we send word to the territorial marshal about your whereabouts." "No," Evangeline said firmly. "I won't go with you." "You don't have a choice, Dove. You owe a debt." "The debt was paid," she replied, her voice growing stronger. "Mr. Stone paid $50 for my time, and I gave him exactly what he paid for." One night of my time," she interrupted. "He chose to spend that time feeding me, giving me a safe place to sleep, and offering me honest work. That was his choice to make." Morrison's face twisted with frustration. "That's not how it works." "That's exactly how it works," Jeremiah said. his voice regaining its strength. I paid for her time and she gave it to me. What I chose to do with that time was my business. You're splitting hairs. I'm stating facts. The transaction was completed as agreed. Mrs. Murphy owes nothing to anyone. Even if that's true, Morrison's companion spoke for the first time. There's still the matter of the doctor's past. That information has value. What do you want? Jeremiah asked wearily. $500, Morrison said. Cash. That buys our silence and our departure. I don't have that kind of money. You've got cattle. Sell them. Even if I could liquidate assets that quickly, I wouldn't pay blackmail. Then you'll hang for malpractice and murder. The standoff continued, tensions rising with each passing moment. Evangeline could see that the situation was spiraling toward violence, with no good outcome for anyone involved. I have a proposition, she said suddenly. All eyes turned to her. What kind of proposition? Morrison asked suspiciously. I'll come with you willingly if you agree to leave Mr. Stone and his people alone permanently. No blackmail, no threats, no contact of any kind. Evangeline, no, Jeremiah said urgently. I won't let you sacrifice yourself for my mistakes. It's not about your mistakes, she replied, looking directly at him. It's about protecting the people I care about. The admission hung in the air like a declaration. Morrison looked between them with growing understanding. Well, he said. Seems like there's more to this arrangement than housekeeping after all. My feelings for Mr. Stone are irrelevant to our business, Evangeline said coldly. Do you accept my offer or not? Morrison considered, clearly weighing the value of a sure thing against the risk of pushing further. Your willing cooperation, no trouble, no attempts to escape? My word on it. And the baby? Stays here, Evangeline said firmly. Thomas has nothing to do with this. The baby comes, Morrison insisted. Insurance that you'll keep your word. Absolutely. Not. Then we have no deal. The negotiation had reached an impasse. Evangeline could see no way to protect both her son and the man who had become so important to her. The choice between them was tearing her apart. There is another option, Jeremiah said quietly. What? Morrison demanded. Trial by combat. The words fell into the silence like stones into still water. Morrison stared at Jeremiah as if he had lost his mind. This isn't the Middle Ages, Doctor. No, but it is the frontier. Territorial law recognizes the right of single combat to settle disputes when both parties agree. You're insane. Am I? You want to settle this matter permanently. So do I. Winner takes all. The woman, the money, the secrets. Loser walks away with nothing. Morrison's companion leaned in to whisper urgently in his ear. Evangeline couldn't hear the words, but she could see the calculation in Morrison's eyes. You're not a fighting man, Morrison said finally. You're a soft Eastern doctor who's never done anything more violent than surgery. Perhaps, but I'm also a man with nothing left to lose. That makes me dangerous. Jeremiah, you can't, Evangeline protested. He'll kill you. Maybe. But at least Thomas will be safe and you'll have a chance to escape in the chaos. The plan was insane, but Evangeline could see the logic behind it. If Jeremiah could create enough confusion, Miguel might be able to get her and Thomas to safety while the fight was happening. Fists or guns? Morrison asked, his professional interest overriding his skepticism. Your choice, Morrison grinned. Fists. I want to enjoy this. They cleared a space in the yard while Miguel and Rosa watched from the porch with Thomas. Evangeline found herself praying to a god she hadn't spoken to since Patrick's death, begging for a miracle she wasn't sure she deserved. The two men circled each other warily. Morrison was younger and clearly more experienced in violence, but Jeremiah had desperation on his side. The first exchange was cautious, each man testing the other's reach and reflexes. Morrison landed the first solid blow, a right cross that staggered Jeremiah but didn't drop him. Jeremiah responded with a combination that caught Morrison off guard, opening a cut above his left eye. For several minutes they traded blows with neither gaining a decisive advantage. Morrison was the better fighter, But Jeremiah's medical knowledge gave him insight into anatomy that served him well in targeting vulnerable spots. The turning point came when Morrison, frustrated by his inability to finish the fight quickly, made a wild swing that left him off balance. Jeremiah stepped inside his guard and delivered an uppercut that lifted Morrison off his feet. Morrison hit the ground hard and stayed down, unconscious before his head struck the earth. His companion looked at the fallen man, then at Jeremiah, and made a quick decision. "This ain't over," he said, holstering his gun. "We'll be back." "No," Jeremiah said, breathing hard but still standing. "You won't. Because if I see either of you near my property again, I'll kill you both." Something in his voice convinced the man that he meant it. After loading the unconscious Morrison onto his horse, they rode away without another word. As the dust settled, Evangeline found herself staring at Jeremiah as if seeing him for the first time. The soft-spoken gentleman who had rescued her from degradation had just fought a man nearly to death to protect her and her son. "You're hurt," she said, noticing the blood on his knuckles and the swelling around his left eye. "Nothing that won't heal," he replied. But she could see him favoring his right side where Morrison had landed several solid body blows. "Come inside. Let me tend to those cuts." As she cleaned his wounds in the kitchen, Evangeline felt compelled to address what had been revealed during the confrontation. "The woman who died in Boston," she said quietly. "Tell me about her." Jeremiah winced as she applied salve to a particularly deep cut on his cheek. "What do you want to know?" "Everything. The truth this time." He was quiet for a long moment, staring at his bandaged hands. "I had been working for 36 hours straight. There was a cholera outbreak, and we were overwhelmed. Dr. Whitman invited me to his retirement celebration, said I needed to rest." "You went to the party?" "I went to the party. I had 2 glasses of whiskey, maybe 3. I thought I was fine. Then they brought in Margaret Collins, and there was no one else available to operate." "What happened?" "I made a mistake. A simple mistake that I would never have made if I had been fully alert. I nicked an artery during the procedure, and by the time I realized what I'd done, she had lost too much blood." Evangeline continued her ministrations, waiting for him to continue. "I could have saved her if I had been sober. There's no doubt about that. My impairment killed her as surely as if I had put a gun to her head. But you didn't intend to hurt her." "Intent doesn't matter to a dead girl or her grieving family. It matters to me," Evangeline said firmly, "and it should matter to you." "Why?" "Because the man who made that mistake learned from it. The man who rescued me from degradation, who has given Thomas and me a home, who just risked his life to protect us. That man has paid for his errors with 5 years of exile and guilt." "You think that's enough?" "I think it's time to forgive yourself." Jeremiah looked at her with something approaching wonder. "Even knowing what I've done, especially knowing what you've done. Patrick always said that a man's character isn't measured by his mistakes, but by how he responds to them." "What? If I can't forgive myself, then let me help you learn how." The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Jeremiah reached up to touch her face, his bandaged fingers gentle against her skin. "I love you," he said simply. "I know it's complicated. I know the circumstances of our meeting were unusual, but I love you and I want to spend the rest of my life proving that you made the right choice in trusting me." "I love you too," she replied, the admission feeling both terrifying and liberating. "I think I have for weeks, but I was afraid to trust my feelings. And now I know that what I feel is real. When I thought Morrison might kill you, I realized that losing you would be like losing Patrick all over again. But different, because you're different." "How am I different?" "Patrick was my first love, the father of my child, the foundation of my youth. You're something else entirely. You're the man who taught me that it's possible to love again, to build something new from the ruins of what was lost." They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony performed by a traveling preacher who made regular circuits through the mining camps. Rosa acted as matron of honor, and Miguel stood as best man. Thomas, now walking steadily and babbling, in the way of children learning to speak, served as an unwitting ring-bearer by playing with the wedding bands until the crucial moment. The blue fabric Jeremiah had given Evangeline for Christmas became her wedding dress, sewn with Rosa's help, into a gown that was both practical and beautiful. It was not the elaborate affair she had dreamed of as a girl, but it was perfect for the woman she had become. As they spoke their vows in the parlor of the ranch house, surrounded by the people who had become their family, Evangeline felt a sense of completion that she had never expected to experience again. This was not a replacement for what she had lost with Patrick, but something entirely new, a love built on mutual respect, shared hardship, and the understanding that came from two people who had both learned the value of second chances. Their reception was a modest affair, but filled with genuine joy. Miguel produced a guitar and played songs from his youth in Texas, while Rosa served a feast that seemed miraculous given the limited ingredients available in the mountains. Thomas delighted everyone by taking his first unassisted steps during the celebration, tottering from Evangeline's arms to Jeremiah's with a determination that made the adults laugh and cry at the same time. As evening fell and their guests settled into comfortable conversation around the fire, Jeremiah and Evangeline stepped onto the porch to look out over the valley that had become their home. "Any regrets?" he asked, his arm around her waist. "Only that it took us so long to admit what we felt," she replied. "We had to be sure. Given how we met, given our pasts, we needed to know that what we felt was real. And now, we know. Now we know." The future stretched before them, full of possibilities and challenges. There would be cattle to raise, a ranch to manage, and Thomas to guide into manhood. There might be other children, God willing, and certainly there would be seasons of difficulty as well as joy, but they would face it all together, two people, who had found in each other the strength to overcome their past and build something beautiful from the ashes of their former lives. Years later, when Thomas was grown and had children of his own, he would ask his parents to tell him the story of how they met. Evangeline and Jeremiah would exchange glances, understanding passing between them like a shared secret, before beginning the tale of a desperate woman, a compassionate man, and the love that grew from an act of kindness in humanity's darkest hour. They would tell him about the importance of second chances, about the difference between sympathy and love, and about how sometimes the most unlikely circumstances can lead to the most profound blessings. But mostly, they would tell him about the truth that had sustained them through all their years together, that love is not just a feeling, but a choice made daily to see the best in another person and to build something lasting from the fragile materials of hope and faith. In the end, theirs was a story not of rescue, but of redemption. Two broken people who had found in each other the courage to heal, to grow, and to create a legacy that would endure long after their own story had ended. The ranch prospered, Thomas grew strong and wise, and Evangeline and Jeremiah discovered that sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as the greatest challenges, and that love, when it is real and true, has the power to transform even the most desperate circumstances into something beautiful and eternal. Their story became legend in the mining camps and settlements of the Sierra Nevada, told around campfires and in saloons as an example of how grace can triumph over desperation, and how the human heart, when given the chance, will always choose love over fear. And in the quiet moments of their life together, when the work was done and Thomas was asleep and the mountains stood silent under the stars, Evangeline and Jeremiah would remember that night in Willow Creek when everything changed, and they would marvel at the mysterious ways that Providence works to bring two souls together in perfect timing, despite all the odds against them. Now that you've watched the full story, we'd really appreciate it if you could rate it out of 10 in the comments. Your thoughts help us improve and ensure we're bringing you the kind of storytelling you truly enjoy.